Hello friends, this is Dr. Bhavdeep Ahuja and I'm continuing my short series on mutual funds. I'll be continuing with the nomenclature I have been discussing in the previous video. So going by the alphabetical manner, the next is the entry load. As I explained in the first video a little bit on entry load. Entry load is basically the amount you have to pay usually at the time of entering or buying into a mutual fund scheme. Most of the fund houses have abolished this entry load, but yes, some do have it. What exactly it is like an entry fee that is charged on the purchase of fund or units by the company, where the investor buys the units of the scheme and is actually fixed at around less than 2% or around 2%. So that means you pay NAV plus the entry load when you buy the units. So accordingly there. So the next terminology is the equity fund. Equity fund or the mutual fund scheme that invest only in the equity or the basically the shares and stocks of the company. Also they are known as kind of stock funds also sometimes, because they have a mix of both stocks and shares in their portfolio. Then one of the most common terminology that is used and is a part of Section 80C is ELSS, Equity Linked Savings Scheme. That is a kind of tax savvy mutual funds which give you an advantage of tax rebate while investing during the time of your investments, and they are exempted up to 1.5 lakh under Section 80C. And the LTCG is not applicable, the long term capital gain, after a period of 1 year in them. So the next terminology is the exit load. So exit load is basically the penalty or the fee charged by the company or the fund house if you exit untimely. Usually there is an exit load applicable up to 1 year of exit, but then some funds may come with a different kind of time parameters as well. But the standard is usually 1 year. So it is the amount that the investor has to pay before selling the units or their assets in before the pre-decided time frame. So it is different from the ELSS, which come in with the equity link saving scheme, which I discussed before. They come with a lock-in of 3 years to be eligible for tax purpose. Otherwise, they will lose their advantage of that. And there is a lock-in; you can't actually exit from them. But for exit load to be applicable on normal mutual fund, usually a period of less than 1 year is applicable. So that would mean that you actually pay NAV minus your exit load while selling your units, and which is again close to 1.8 to 2%, varies from companies to companies, and you pay accordingly that. The next terminology is the expense ratio. It is basically the amount to be paid funds house for managing your money. Usually the fund manager's fees and the other expenses that are associated for management of the fund. There are a lot of other costs as well. So the expense ratio is the total expense which is incurred by the fund house when compared to the total assets that it acquires. So this varies. In a regular fund the expenses are more, the expense ratio is more. In the direct funds it is much lesser. So then the next term is the fund manager, which we have discussed before. He is a professionally qualified individual who manages your funds. Some fund managers are based on their skill, experience, and sometimes their past track record are usually overrated. So which those fund managers actually are expensive to the company. So accordingly, the expense ratio of that fund would be higher. So always check out for the expense ratio as well, along with the OM that I mentioned before, AUM, before investing into the mutual fund. So the next is fund units or the shares or whatever. So the number of units as we talk about it. So the investment is actually by buying the units of the mutual fund, as I told you earlier. So the investors like us, like you, would invest in the company, pay the amount, and get back the units. The total amount divided by the NAV, you'll get the units accordingly. So the more the number of units you buy, the higher is your investment, and maybe the higher the number of units you will be getting as per that fund. Then there is a growth plan, as I mentioned about the dividend plan as well in the previous video. So the growth plan, the aim is basically to reinvest the amount. The long-term capital growth is the main initiative behind the growth funds methodology. So the next usually term used is the holding period. The amount of time which you hold the security or that investment is known as the holding period. That means from the initial date of buying the same and till the date of its sale. Then the next term, which is very commonly we hear these days, is the index fund. So fund is basically the funds that purchase securities following the patterns of the returns generated by the BSE Sensex. So an index fund actually focuses on the purchase of securities which match or represent a particular index or the benchmark sometimes. So the portfolio of such fund is actually designed to mimic or track the components of that specific market index which it is actually trying to mimic. Then the next term we commonly listen is the liquid funds. So liquid funds are actually similar to the money market funds. Of course, L comes before M, so not discuss money market, but they are similar to money market funds, but they don't have any lock-in period. You can exit in any time. Usually they invest in the money market instruments like the CODs, which we call as the certificate of deposits, commercial papers or treasury bills, or even the term deposits. So their returns are almost same, but the difference only is that money market minus the lock-in period is actually the liquid fund, liquid funds. So the next terminology is the lock-in period. So this is the period for which the investor is actually invested by default. You cannot actually exit out of the lock-in period. You are not allowed to sell an investment during the lock-in period. You will stay locked in that scheme. Even if you need the funds, you have to look for alternate source because that fund is not available for redemption from you. And certain funds will stipulate an amount of time period. As I mentioned, ELSS come with a 3-year lock-in period. So accordingly, you cannot exit for 3 years from that. So somebody, if he's invested in a ELSS in SIP mode, remember if you invested in June 2018, your first SIP became ELSS free this month. So that would mean that whatever you have invested in July will become accordingly similar in that. So in the case of SIP, you count as per your date of installment. That installment goes on becoming SIP, say tax free, sorry, lock-in period free with each passing month if the investment is monthly based. But if it has been a lump sum investment that was done in June 2018 in an ELSS or an equity linked saving scheme, the same becomes now say lock-in period free. You can actually liquidate the investment if you feel like redeeming the money. Ideally, you should stay invested minimum period of 4 to 5 years, because a period of 4 or 5 years is an ideal one where you actually cut out the risks of a loss. But yes, if your targets have been for the short-term returns or maybe for a specific purpose, then you can maybe redeem your investment. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'll be finishing the nomenclature in the next video, and please do like, share and comment amongst the colleagues. So this is video number 3 of mutual funds. Thank you. Stay tuned. Bye bye. Take care.